let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this Product Blender event with Teresa. Our topic for today is going to be accelerating your product roadmap with 2-hour design sprints. And most of us here are either in product or UX domains, and we want to plan ahead either for the next year, next quarters, and so on. So here is a quick agenda for you to plan for the next 1 hour. So as many of you know, we have annual Women in Product conferences. So we had seen a lot of engagement in all these conferences, and one new format that we have been trying since the past 1 year is these Product Blender events, where all of us come together specifically for a particular topic and hone in our skills specifically for those topics. So that's how Product Blender events are ideally set. So this sessions last generally for an hour or 1.5 hours, along with a probable networking event towards the end as well. So this event specifically is with Teresa on running design sprints, specifically 2-hour design sprints. So for the next 20-25 minutes, Teresa is going to have or share a lot of power-packed insights that we can take and put into use in our everyday jobs. So after the insights that are being shared, we'll also have an opportunity to connect one-on-one with the other attendees, share the prompt, discuss the prompt and our learnings for the next 20 minutes. It can be either 7 to 10 minutes of 2 sessions. You can just choose. You will automatically be paired with one other attendee. So in order for that to be perfectly matched, also use your profile icon on the top right to make sure you add in the necessary LinkedIn information, any specifics about your job, so that each of you have context on the background of each other and share your background specific pointers as well. So once that one-on-one discussion is over, you'll automatically be brought to the center stage again, and you'll share the space directly with Teresa here for 10 to 15 minutes and directly ask questions with her. So definitely a great opportunity to connect with her towards the end. Don't miss that out. So that's the agenda. And you are going to see me talk as well in addition to Teresa for the next 1 hour. So just a quick couple liners on me. I am Srinidhi. I am a product manager with Amazon Music. I primarily work or own the subscription tier of Amazon Music, which is the Amazon Music Unlimited. And outside of work, I believe we grow as communities, and Women in Product has definitely been a key community for the success in my product management career. So in addition to Women in Product volunteering, I am a chapter lead with an organization called Products by Women, which is a nonprofit that helps bring in more women into tech and business. And I always believe that all of us have wings and all we need to fly, just one step at a time. And here is my LinkedIn ID in case any of you want to connect with me after the event as well. So that's about me. And today we have our special guest, Teresa. She is the director of product and UX design at TreviPay, and she is also a founder of and CEO of Lucid Startup Consulting. And one more fun fact that probably I just knew before the event was Teresa also sings, so probably some exclusive access just for us. I'll pass it on to Teresa to learn more about you and to kick off the event, Teresa.
Thanks for that. I won't be singing today. I was mentioning my vocal cords are a little strained lately, so hopefully you can hear me okay today. No, thanks for that introduction. I really love that motto that you mentioned as well. That's really great. Well, thanks everyone for joining and for having me. As you mentioned, I am currently with TreviPay. We are a global B2B fintech, and we're based out of our headquarters are based out of the Kansas City area, but we actually have offices all over the world. So lots of travel, including the Netherlands and Australia, several areas. And I do also have a startup on the side called Lucid Startup Consulting, mainly for workshopping and coaching startups with the focus on women-led startups. And that's really kind of the passion that kind of got me into that. And then in terms of what we're talking about today, I've led, coached, or participated in over 60 design sprints. So this really is a passion of mine, and I'm hoping to really share kind of a condensed version of this today so that you can kind of take that away. And then I've also shared at the end kind of a 50% off discount to any sessions if you're wanting to take what you learned today and learn a little bit more and take one more step. So. All right. So before we get started, I wanted to really kick things off with a quote, and this really resonates with me when we talk about 2-hour design sprints. So in a turbulent age, the only dependable advantage is a superior capacity for reinventing your business model before circumstances force you to. And this actually came from a Harvard Business Review article called The Quest for Resilience back in 2003. And that was a time of a lot of change. Lots of changes with Apple, lots of changes with Amazon. I know you're at Amazon Music. And, a time when you look back to the iPods and you look fast forward to today where your music is on your iPhone, it's everywhere. So lots of change. And the reality is, if we don't reinvent our business model, we will be forced to from all the competitors that are joining the space. And that especially rings true in the fintech space. There are new competitors that pop up every few weeks. And so I'm hoping what you'll be able to take away today is some problem-solving skills using 2-hour design sprints that will help you accelerate your product roadmap. So what's the benefit of a 2-hour design sprint? And we'll talk a bit about what exactly a 2-hour design sprint is for those that haven't participated in one before. So 2-hour design sprints create more opportunities for success by increasing the frequency and speed of problems you can solve as an organization. And we'll talk about why here on the next slide. So for those that are not familiar with a design sprint or design thinking, a design sprint was really derived from design thinking methodologies. So design thinking methodologies actually started in the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of really popular books that were around visual learning and thinking. And design thinking became a concept that is very similar to waterfall, if anyone's familiar with that before the time of Agile, where which thankfully, everyone's a little bit of both these days, depending on what you're working on. But there wasn't really a time box. You could spend months to years really understanding a complex problem, walking through 5 stages: empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, testing. And these are all words that sound very familiar to us in product management or UX and design, because we use this as part of our methodologies for product management and agile methodologies. So that was really fantastic, but similar to kind of waterfall kind of going out of style, so did design thinking. And Jake Knapp and the team at Google had come up with what's called a 5-day design sprint. And this is really what I would call a traditional design sprint. This is really what it started off as. So they took that design thinking methodology and they condensed it down into 5 similar stages: understanding, diverging, deciding, prototyping, and testing. So you're really focusing on 1 stage per day. And what's really changed with 2-hour design sprints is I've condensed it a little further, so down to 2 hours. And there was a lot of drivers in this condensing. The biggest one was it's very expensive. So you could actually spend $50,000 to $100,000 bringing in third-party moderators running design sprints, which I've done several times over the years at different organizations. And so this 2-hour design sprint concept not only will allow you to advance your own roadmap, but take control as an organization to move quicker. So you're able to do multiple design sprints in a week or month versus 2 to 3 5-day design sprints in a year. And absolutely, you'll get a copy of this content afterwards. And I believe also a copy of the recording. So that's really fantastic. So ultimately, explaining just in a bit of a summary, 2-hour design sprints are actually inspired by both design thinking and design sprint methods and really used for accelerating concepts. So ultimately, this is a 3-stage approach that you'll take during a 2-hour design sprint that we'll talk about here a bit further. So what will implementing 2-hour design sprints allow you to do? So ultimately, the goal with the 2-hour design sprint is to push the high value features to your clients faster and cheaper. When you have a 2-hour design sprint that you're able to complete, as a team, you come out of that 2-hour meeting with a concept that you're able to decide, hey, should we bring this into our 2-week or 4-week sprint cycle? And oftentimes, I mentioned I've participated in or ran over 60 and that was actually really just the last couple of years. In moving to a shorter duration, we've actually conducted over 25 2-hour design sprints at TreviPay in the last 17 months, which is unheard of. Before the COVID pandemic had happened, we would maybe be able to fit 5 in a year. And ultimately, again, for those that haven't participated in a design sprint, what you're doing is you're pulling stakeholders from all parts of the organization to really problem solve together. And when you do that and you look at a traditional 5-day design sprint, that can be very expensive, not just from whether you're bringing in a third-party moderator, but if you bring in 20 people to a room for 40 hours, that is very expensive, especially if the outcome is that you're not going to move forward with the problem that you were talking about, which can be an outcome of a design sprint and is a perfectly okay one. I've actually, there was actually a 5-day design sprint I had run a couple years ago, and the outcome was to not move forward. And I just remember the executive team gasping on like, what? This was so expensive. We're not moving forward. So ultimately, the goal here is that you're able to really eliminate any holes in the process earlier and less expensive. And it doesn't mean that 5-day design sprints don't have their place. They absolutely do. But those are really more for large, complex problems. And we'll talk a bit more about that. So I'm just pushing on that. High value features to your clients. And what really makes great for this is small to medium problems. So a small to medium problem is something that as a team, you can likely complete in less than 6 months. And every organization is different. You have different sets of engineers, designers, product management of how you allocate that time. But that time cap of 6 months is to make you really focus on a small or medium problem. And I'll provide some examples before we go into the breakout rooms for that with the blender. But ultimately, if we're able to really condense this down, what you'll be able to come out of today is have a problem that you'll be able to take and run a 2-hour design sprint with at your organization. All right, well, let's just hop right into the blender content. So, all right. So, and again, feel free to send any questions you have in the chat as well. And again, oh, you want to go back to the prior slide, just one? Yep, we can go back before the blender. So just kind of focusing on the topics before we go into the blender. So what we're going to, again, have today is you are going to decide on a topic that would be great to bring in to a 2-hour design sprint. So with those topics, you want to focus on small to medium problems. What makes really great topics for this is something maybe already on your backlog that's in a discovery stage, something you received as a client request that's got a delivery date on it, anything that's going to advance you into a new industry or persona you haven't really discovered that would make really great table conversation for stakeholders across the org. And again, focusing on these aren't meant to be really large problems that are going to take 1 to 2 years to complete as an organization. So you're not completing a brand new line of business of, oh, you know what, I'm going to bring my entire company that's focused in retail into the healthcare industry. You're not going to solve that in a 2-hour design sprint. You want to take something that is very focused that you want to have some answers on from several stakeholders. And that's really the output of what will happen in that 2-hour design sprint. And just a reminder, with this session today, this is kind of a product blender for a reason, right? You're not going to learn everything about the 2-hour design sprint in this one sitting. So certainly feel free to reach out with any questions afterwards. I'm always happy to answer. And also why I provided, some additional sessions if you're really wanting to dive deep, but I'm always willing and happy to answer questions if you have any. So, all right. So when we talk about, all right, great. One-on-one discussion prompt. Yep. That's an announcement. So with that blender prompt, okay, so what we're going to go into here, I'm going to provide a couple examples before you go into your one-on-one blenders. So just reiterating, you're going to explore an opportunity at your organization that could benefit from a 2-hour design sprint that, again, the focus is meant to be able to accelerate it and move it into your sprint cycles quicker so that you can release it further and sooner in your roadmap. So when you're identifying a topic that you're going to bring into your one-on-one, again, you're each going to have about 5 minutes to talk to one another and kind of walk through what your problem and outcome is going to be. So some key questions to really think about are, What do you know about the problem or opportunity? And again, this could be a feature, task, or something we just talked about in terms of how you identify a problem at your org. What don't you know about it? That's also very critical, because this may be something you don't know a whole lot about and you have several answers, and why it's so critical to have a 2-hour design sprint. And then most importantly, who will benefit the most from this solution? So what's the outcome? Who are the end users? Is this going to be a feature that will get a high adoption rate? Is it something that's going to be an internal release? So you really want to understand who your users are of what you're talking about. And that's a really great question that has come in. Is a design sprint methodology strictly for producing UX related designs, or for any type? And honestly, I would say over the last couple of years, I've actually run several business focused non-UX related design sprints, really the past couple months as well. And no, you could have a concept that you're trying to solve as an organization. For instance, maybe you want to do a SharePoint rollout as an organization, and you don't know how you're going to go about it. So you could use this process to really solve any problem. It doesn't have to be something that's going to have a design output. And actually, the way that these 2-hour design sprints are focused, none of the prototyping and testing are done within the 2 hours because of that reason, because you're able to really problem solve and focus on ideating a solution as a stakeholder group. So that's a really fantastic question. So this is just an example idea exploration, and just trying to resonate with the group, kind of seeing like a few profiles from different companies coming in. So let's say you have an idea for a new mobile app, and you're really just exploring, well, what do you know? You know that mobile user adoption is low. Maybe you have Google Analytics, Amplitude, you have any types of metrics that are being measured of where people are clicking, what they're using. Maybe you understand that users are accessing the website from their phone, but you don't have a native mobile app. Maybe you have a responsive website and they can't really see everything that they get on the website on their phone, but they're certainly using their phone still because they're tied to it for their role. Exploring what don't you know? How often do you think these users will use a new mobile app? Is it worth the investment? And then who will benefit the most? So the customers that you're kind of talking about for this new mobile app, are they going to be actually accessing their account from their mobile device? So maybe you have a physician that maybe they're using the iPad all day and they're not accessing their phone. And so that would be a different use case of a physician that is maybe doing patient healthcare through an iPad instead of a computer, but maybe they don't have access to their phone all day, so they don't have all the features. So those are the types of explorations that you just want to think through and making a great topic for a 2-hour design sprint. So next, you want to really focus on creating a problem statement. And this doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a high-level problem statement of you have a clear understanding of what you're trying to solve for the topic that you're really focusing on for this design sprint. So again, some key questions to think about are, what is the purpose of the feature discovery? What are the benefits or gaps, and what are the outcomes for the users? And if you haven't created a problem statement before, I'm sure many on the call are very used to writing user stories, or have before, or at least familiar with user stories. But ultimately, this is no different than writing a user story, in that you're really trying to understand who their user is and how the feature or task that you're creating is going to help them. And that's why you're working on it. So here's an example on the next slide in terms of a easy problem statement. The purpose of the mobile app redesign is to create a better user experience for customers so they can access their account balance statements and make purchases. So again, this is very simple. We know that we're talking about a mobile app redesign. We know we want to create a better user experience because users are not accessing the mobile app in the way that we want them to. And we also know what they're using it for, what we think they'll use it for. We think they'll check their account balances. We think they'll check their statements, and we'll think they'll make purchases. So again, you really have to focus on the 80% here, right? You're not going to capture every single workflow in a problem statement, and certainly not during a product blender either. So, but for today, really focusing on that 80% of what are you going to be focusing on for these users. And with step number one is really identifying your problem first. So you want to identify what idea or feature would really make a great topic for a 2-hour design sprint. And then next, you kind of want to write your problem statement of why. And those are two really critical steps in terms of that idea exploration. True. That is true. You can use a user voice. So a user story is typically as a user. But the reason the problem statement isn't by persona is you could have multiple personas during that. So the user stories are very user persona specific, but the problem statement is really more generalistic of the entire idea. That's a really great call out. So we talked a little bit about the stakeholder list. So kind of next is really understanding who would make a great diverse attendee list to include in this 2-hour design sprint. So as part of that, you want to invite no more than 15 to 20 participants. And if you can include 1 to 2 attendees from each area of the business, that would be really important. So I've got some examples on this next slide as well. So example stakeholder list, you've got, let's say you're the product manager, you're also going to be the moderator for this 2-hour design sprint. If you have a product owner, a solution manager, I really enjoy bringing in anyone from the UX team or designers because they have that creative thinking. And then you want to make sure there's key stakeholders from your engineering team, whether that's a developer or architect, and then anyone from other departments that are going to have touch points with those customers. So that could be account management, customer support, marketing, and anyone specific to your industry that's going to be critical to that. So yes, that's a really great topic. And I saw the other one as well. I did hear about the Queen. That is very, very sad news to hear that happened this morning. So, so in terms of the number of people for design sprints, the most I've ever had in a design sprint, which is terrifying, I'll never do it again. I've had 65 people in a design sprint. And this was a really large conference room. And I'll tell you how it went down. It was not a place where we came with an outcome. There were too many cooks in the kitchen. Decisions weren't made. People were coming in and out of the room, distracted by phone calls, client meetings. And so the reason why I've suggested no more than 15 to 20 stakeholders is once you get past 20 participants in an active design sprint or even just a workshop, you have too many distractions. People aren't focused. They think they can be a little lazy and not pay attention, and you kind of lose their attention and focus. And the whole point of a design sprint, whether it's a 2-hour design sprint or a 5-day design sprint, is as a stakeholder group, you are problem solving an idea so that you can have an outcome. And that outcome for your organization that we talked about here a bit ago is to accelerate your roadmap. And how you do that is you want to make, you're using that 2-hour design sprint to make a quicker decision as an organization so you can move it into your sprint cycle that much quicker. Yep. 20, I would say that's changed. I would say that over the years, 10 is, kind of outdated from when that book was created. So it really has changed over the years to be around 20. And I've actually talked to a few other kind of stakeholders in the Silicon Valley area about this actually just a couple weeks ago. But I would say 20 is the new 10 for design sprints, whether that's 2 hours or 5 days. Yep. And I do have in my references, as I mentioned, this process is based on both Stanford Design School and Jake Knapp and the team at Google's Design Sprint methodology. All this was derived from that. So I do have the reference link of that book in there, and as well as the design school at Stanford. So, all right. So some key takeaways before we go into our one-on-ones. So ultimately, you now have to be thinking about an idea that you're going to talk about in these blenders, come up with a problem statement and your stakeholder list that you could take that into your design sprint. But the overall goal here is to release high value features faster. With a 2-hour design sprint, you have the ability to conduct multiple design sprints in a month versus just a handful a year. And then your biggest goal here is you're not only including these stakeholders to get their opinions, but you're also getting their buy-in. So having them in the 2-hour design sprint is allowing you to inherently get buy-in and get approval of that feature faster. A few questions that have kind of come in here. In terms of Moderating. Yeah. So again, like with this product blender today, I've kind of focused it pretty high level. So I certainly do have a lot of suggestions on how not to get in the weeds, but ultimately the biggest way to not get on the weeds is to have an agenda. So you have a set defined agenda that you are going to time box. And I've got a couple links at the end of the deck. You could kind of look and see those agendas. There's not enough time today to dive into that, but ultimately you're going to spend no more than like 10 to 15 minutes on the problem statement. And then you're going to talk about ideating and sketching solutions. And then as a group, you're kind of problem solving. So everything is a time boxed approach. And oftentimes with organizations, that's what's gotten a lot of people into trouble with 5-day design sprints, is it could turn into a 7-day design sprint. You know, there's too much in there that it leads organizations to kind of spend too much time and spend their wheels instead of focusing on the actual problem. And then a few sprints on the same topic. Yeah, actually, the great thing about design sprints is whether it's a 2-hour or 5-day is you could need more design sprints after that. And that is actually the whole intent of the 2-hour design sprint. It's not just to say that design thinking or a 5-day design sprint aren't beneficial. It's to say, we're going to focus on this problem and solve it in 2 hours using these methods because we know that they'll be beneficial and it'll allow us to eliminate holes so we don't waste a bunch of money for the organization. And we talked about earlier the quote on this page of being able to reinvent your business model before circumstances force you to. We're in a time of technology where you can't afford 6 to 12 months to wait on a feature. That is not something that you can do anymore, where several years ago when that book was released with the 5-day design sprints, waterfall was still kind of etching out of organizations. And it was much easier for organizations to do that, or for much larger organizations that have a ton of bandwidth to be able to do that. But many organizations just don't have that bandwidth or time to wait 6 to 12 months to really implement a feature. So the whole point is to really take this concept and be able to implement it much quicker. So, and you could run multiple at the same time, just to reiterate. That's perfectly fine.
So Teresa, shall we kick off the one-on-one blenders and let the questions keep coming, and please get on the stage. You'll have 10-15 minutes to connect on the stage with Teresa and ask any follow-up questions as well. So for folks who are trying to answer the prompt before you move on to the one-on-one blenders, just three key takeaways. 1, decide on a topic. 2, drill down on the problem statement further. And then 3, create a key list of stakeholders that would actually benefit from this design sprint. So those are the 3 questions that you would have to think of. So on the left side, where there is reception, sessions, one-on-one blenders, and replay, the third option is one-on-one blenders. So you just have to click on that, and then there is a prompt.
So I know you've run several design sprints on your own, like you've participated in them. So like what are some challenges you've kind of seen with those kind of in your past?
So in both the 2-3 organizations that I've been part of, it was primarily the UX team running these design sprints, and all of us just pitch in to share our own ideas, problem statements that we are facing that we would want to solve. So one hiccup that we might have faced in the past is very broad problem statements. So it would take us some more time for us to drill down on the specific pain point that we are trying to solve and find out the outcome. So that has been a slow learning, and we have started narrowing down or drilling down a key problem statement, and then it has been going good. The other thing that we have been learning is all of us come with different perspectives just for the problem statement itself. Yeah. So especially when parties like finance are in the picture, they have a completely different mindset on how we have to approach. So what we have also started trying is narrowing down on stakeholders that might actually directly be impacted because of that, and not bring in the extended stakeholders for that. So those 2 were really hard learnings for us, and we are slowly improving.
Yeah, it is interesting how every organization has a different way of running them. And I'd had, I'm not sure which section of Amazon, but I did train a few people from Amazon a couple months back, and it sounded like it was like different companies within Amazon almost.
That's true. Yeah.
Much larger organizations. Like it's probably done a little differently in each division. So.
Yeah, I agree. Like each product is an org by itself with its own processes. So.
Yeah.
So something that I might also be curious to try out more in the future is I've always been with B2C products. So that has shaped a lot of my mindset and thinking towards it as well. And most of it has been software. So B2B and hardware are two different things that I am not quite sure how I could apply or take these learnings from design sprints forward. So that is definitely something that I would want to explore in the future.
Yeah. I have a pretty mixed path of both. And I have a lot of B2B right now. And it's interesting because in B2B, you actually have both B2B and B2C. So there's a lot of three-party models where, in our case at TreviPay, we have our merchants and then our merchants customers. So we do a lot of marketplaces. And so that is a really great point out, though, as your audience really does vary, whether you're B2C or B2B. And you have, we have 20 personas, for some of the different solutions, whereas B2C, you have like very direct and it's more demographic differences versus types of roles. So.
Yeah. So for this B2B to C type of products, would you recommend focusing more on the actual buyer or the actual user? So how do you generally recommend for people who are on the call to start thinking that towards?
Yeah. So I didn't dive, obviously with this being shorter, I had normally a whole section on user personas, and typically I'll have 3 lines of user personas. So I'll have the buyer user personas, customer, and then something we call dealer and merchant personas.
Right.
And since those are already created, if an organization hasn't already created user personas, that's a really great thing to start with before you go to in design sprints. But ultimately, with those, it's really more, okay, which persona are we focusing on? And we just kind of pull that in. And for new solutions, like many companies, there's lots of new tech going on. So, we're working on some new personas right now. And that discovery is kind of the critical piece before even going into a design sprint, because you're doing customer interviews and business interviews. So it's a little more time consuming with B2B, but
definitely, yeah.
But it does seem to be what I like about B2B is it's a little more stable than B2C. So if there's a feature that the B2C side hadn't picked up in the past, there's a really high drop-off percentage. You could have a 20% hit on a feature, where in B2B, it's not really as volatile. So there's a lot less turnover, when you're releasing new features. So. Yeah, one thing, obviously with this being condensed, that we didn't talk about today is, what everyone uses for 2-hour design sprints. And so we have been using more Figma FigJam. And I used Envision Freehand for a very long time. And Figma FigJam has just been releasing so many new features that, it's kind of become my favorite online whiteboard tool. So, yeah.
So in our org, designers are primarily the people who have access to FigJam. So all of us do still hop on Figma to start in our thoughts and collaborate, but I know FigJam has a lot more collaboration opportunities.
Yeah. Which I think I went right at time, but I obviously there's a lot of content, but it's which pieces to focus on, because that's a whole nother training, is walking through FigJam. But the best thing about it, I don't know if you've done in-person design sprints in your past, but I had literally at our old office, a bucket of Post-it notes and permanent markers. And so, really you're going to these design sprints and you're setting up all the Post-it notes, all the large white pieces of paper. And if one of the Post-it notes falls off the board, I mean, you're just like, where did this go? So
Yeah. So I think the last in-person design sprint that I was on was probably 3 years back. Everything after that was online, and it's really a very vague memory. But I still remember sticky notes falling off and putting
yeah,
that back. So all of us have gone through that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's some good memories. I'm curious. I mean, even now, you know, I think I mentioned like we're just moving back into our office now 3 years later. And even now, I will use the Figma FigJam over that process. And so that's what's really like created the efficiencies for 2-hour design, you know, any lesser hour design sprint to be able to be successful. So
Right. So we have other new tools like Mural, which is also somewhat similar to FigJam. So a lot of new competitors of FigJam as well in the
yeah,
design thinking
yeah.
industry.
I would say I'm not as big a fan of that one. So yeah, but I've definitely used that quite a bit. There's a lot of lag. So they are like, if you try to use Safari with Mural, first of all, like it's not gonna work. And so they're like kind of Chrome based, but there's little things missing. Like there's not a timer, and just in terms of like running a design sprint out of it, it just like there's some key pieces that are missing there. Looking at the sprint book, there's a sketching part of it. Who does the sketching? Yeah. So since today was like a blender, a focus one, we didn't talk much about the sketching, but ultimately in a traditional, like this is a condensed design sprint, and sketching is actually still part of that 2 hours. So sketching happens kind of when you're ideating solution, and every single person participating in the design sprint participates in the sketching. And that's kind of the beauty of the problem solving is everyone has their own way of expressing how to solve a problem. So that could be something as simple as I'm big on like, I have paper, whiteboard, and I do like balsamic, Figma, you name it. So that's actually the great component of a design sprint is you're able to inherently have everyone problem solve in their own visual way, and you're immediately sharing that with one another. And we didn't talk a lot about kind of the online whiteboard tool today, just because today the focus wasn't on like how to go use Figma FigJam. It was more on like, how do you actually come up with an idea that you can make that impact? But I use Figma FigJam and Envision Freehand for design sprints, and those are both free up to 3 projects. And there's a lot of templates that will kind of show you how to guide through that sketching piece as well. So how much time on average does it take to plan a 2-hour design sprint with reasonable scope? So one of the things we didn't talk about, which when we pull the slides back up, I have a couple resources in there. So actually not a whole lot of time, and that's kind of the beauty of a 2-hour design sprint. So a few weren't able to make the chat. And what I was talking about in that time before is the tool I recommend for using 2-hour design sprints is Figma FigJam. And Figma FigJam is really fantastic because it's an online collaborative tool, and it's got available templates. I've also got specific 2-hour design sprint templates I'll mention here at the end. But ultimately, it really doesn't take more than like, once you kind of get in, do one design sprint, like you're not really spending more than 20 minutes. Whereas for those that have ever participated in an old-fashioned 5-day design sprint, I would be spending a lot of time setting up Post-it notes, large white pieces of paper, and there's a lot of time spending writing on Post-it notes and everything that's kind of done in person. And that's what's really fantastic about that. So there is only 5-day FigJam design sprints available. Templates available. I do have a template that I offer as well. So that's something that you can, I've got 2 sessions going on. I'll just like mention, I have an on-demand training that like basically walks through, this was kind of like just a portion of like what I talk a lot about at workshops. And so there are a few workshops. There's an on-demand training that's only like 40 minutes and you get the FigJam template. So I just gave a 50% discount to the group. And then there's also a 2-hour design sprint workshop on October 19th that'll kind of be with peers globally, where I'll walk through Figma, FigJam, and like you'll walk through basically a mock design sprint as a team if you felt more comfortable with that. So some people that haven't done that, feel more comfortable that way. But if you didn't want to do either of those, just search design sprint in FigJam, in Figma FigJam, and there are 5-day design sprints you can just modify down. Let's see, a couple other questions here.
Do any of you want to pop in on the stage and ask the questions directly with Teresa? That's definitely a great opportunity as well.
Sure.
So my question is, how do we run a 2-hour design sprint? I like the idea. It sounds great. I've got lots of ideas on what I could bite off here, but like, what do I do?
Yeah. So today's topic was kind of focused more on the value of it. So in terms of running a 2-hour design sprint, outside of I'll pop the sessions I mentioned in there. I have a website, but I used Gumroad to be able to run like a discount just for this women in product group. So I'll pop those links into there. But ultimately, with a 2-hour design sprint, if you're not able to go to either of those, I can kind of walk you through some more specifics. But ultimately, you're kind of setting your agenda. So your step one, you've done kind of the legwork. You guys have come up with an idea. You've set your problem statement and your stakeholder list. So after that, you're really kind of setting up the design sprint. And as I mentioned, Figma FigJam is the tool that I would use for that. And with Figma FigJam, you're able to kind of put your problem statement in. You've got your concept, and then you invite all your stakeholders to use that. And that's kind of where you're kind of running effectively that 2-hour design sprint in there, walking through the different stages. So I know that doesn't fully answer your question, like to walk through it completely, but maybe that's something we could take offline and I can connect you with on.
Yeah, I'd love to find out more about that. Thanks.
Okay.
But so my question is that most of my experience is in platform side, and as you would know, at platform side, it's really important to get that feasibility research from the engineers from the very beginning stage of the product design. But there are times that they would ask for some time because the ideas would require most research from the engineering managers to make sure whether or not the idea is viable and feasible. So within a 2-hour design session, it's not possible for them to come up with a decision for the team that whether or not this idea is basically doable for the team. So how do you think I should, as a product manager, go for such situation and those platform-based ideas?
Sure. So with that, is that who you having the stakeholder issues with? It's just the design side, or who are the stakeholders that are?
Well, actually, the design side is not the problem. The problem is just the engineers. Well, I work with engineers, design, solution engineers, customer success, and everyone that needs to be in the room to make the decision. But there are many times, because the focus is on the platform, that the engineers would push back and say, well, I need 2 weeks or 3 weeks to make sure whether or not this idea is technologically feasible for us, and whether or not we can support this idea from the architecture side, from the backend side.
Sure. No. Okay. That makes a little more sense. So with that, I think that one of the things that we didn't really talk about today is one of the challenges we have as product managers, right? And so even though I lead a team of product managers, I also take a piece of the product. So I run into the same challenges just as my product managers do. And so with that, what you're really talking about is more about stakeholder buy-in. And the way that I have really combated with that is I've built kind of one-on-one sessions with every individual before going into the 2-hour design sprint to get their buy-in before coming in. So what I would do, let's say you have that stakeholder list of 10. And again, this might be a little more time than what someone else would spend with it, but definitely beneficial when you have challenges like that. So set up a one-on-one time with them, walk through your concept and problem statement and kind of the why and sell the value, and let them give their feedback on it. And so if you can build that relationship with them and be able to get their buy-in, you will have so much more success when they come into that design sprint and they're a cheerleader for it versus kind of pushing against you.
Awesome. No, definitely makes sense. And thank you so much for sharing the insight.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah.
So one of the, on our side, if we're not starting with kind of net new asks or net new features or net new problems, kind of where you have a blue sky design, when we're beholden to existing software or existing backends, and we're just trying to build a new UI UX, does a 2-hour session work for that when you have to make sure that you're making all the same connections with new designs?
Yeah, absolutely. So are these like building new designs on existing designs or net new, you said?
Yeah, yep. There's the
New
existing software has its own UI. Now we want to build, a new one, but with the same connections.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a series of portals at TreviPay, and oftentimes like we'll have like a brand new feature request come in where we already have either, and obviously many organizations probably have design systems as well, that you're kind of building off similar screens.
Yeah.
So those actually work really great and sometimes easier than bringing in a new challenge. And the reason is because everyone's already familiar with the system and design. So you're able to problem solve much quicker that way. And you're really focusing on the solution instead of really explaining the problem. So I think that is actually a much easier process to get that stakeholder buy-in versus what we talked about before when you're challenging with, a brand new platform solution and you're trying to get buy-in. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So my question is, usually my experience with designers has been that they want to take a while, do a lot of research on user experience and design thinking as well. So when if I try to usually ask for a shorter timeline, we get pushback. So how do you position 2-hour design sprints especially when you want to include UX designers into the sprint?
Absolutely.
And not make it sound like you're undermining their work.
Sure, absolutely. So over the last couple of years, so I'm actually also over our UX and design team as well, but I wasn't always. I just took that over a couple of years ago. But ultimately, the intent of 2-hour design sprints is to really put the power in the hands of the product manager or product owner. And the reason is the UX design team I'm over now, we have our own roadmaps and our own planning, and they're subject to the same roadmap issues that we are as product managers, where they don't have enough time. So that's kind of where this concept of 2-hour design sprints really goes into play, is putting it in the hands of the product manager. So the buy-in that you're getting from them is, hey, I know you have a set of priorities. This is the priority that I have, and I would love to drive this, and I'd love to have you sit in and not have to run it. And so really what you're doing is you're taking the load off their plate by having that. And I think really just in my time in the industry the last 15 years, the product manager role has become so much more UX focused. You have to be putting UX first as a product manager. And this is really the first step to do that. So similar to kind of my mention earlier of creating those relationships, I would set up some one-on-one time and really get their buy-in for why you're driving it and your passion for wanting to kind of move that forward and build that relationship to get their buy-in to not just like that you're going to do it, but also participate as a stakeholder instead of having to run it.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I know we are at time. Would you have time for a couple more questions before we sign off?
Yeah, I've got some time.
Yes.
Have to.
Chang, you're next. So we have a couple of upvotes for the next question as well. So.
Hi, Teresa. My question is, when you set agenda for the stakeholders in the audience, what's the effective goal when you communicate? I want us to finish this session with takeaways as such.
Yeah. So kind of the first thing before kind of even having the design sprint, like whether you're sending out a meeting invite, like, Gmail, Outlook, whatever's being used, you're kind of like, everyone that's joining that meeting is kind of agreeing that they're coming in to pay 100% attention to that design sprint. And so that team agreement of all the stakeholders, I would say, is really the most critical part of building that agenda. So when you have those first 5 minutes, you're basically saying, hey, this is our set agenda. We're going to be very time boxed. And what's really fantastic about FigJam is they have a timer. So you're able to kind of track and time box everything. And so that timer, you use it the whole time. And if you don't have or don't want to use the timer, I mean, everyone's got these nearby, right? So, but that's really the biggest thing, is making sure everyone understands that they're fully committed and you're sticking to that set agenda, that entire agenda, step by step. So, does that make sense?
So does that mean the takeaway is more organic? We don't necessarily know what will be the conclusion we take away with at the end of the session?
Right. So ultimately, you're either deciding and agreeing as a group that you have a viable solution, or you're deciding that you don't. So that's really the key takeaway, is you as a group, you now have all the experts, all the subject matter experts in the room, and you're going to decide together whether you're going to move forward with the solution you've come up with, or you're going to say, you know what, maybe we need another 2-hour design sprint, or maybe this just isn't going to work, before you get it into the hands of prototyping and into testing with customers. So,
got it. Thank you. Makes sense.
Thank you. It's a great question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm actually an undergrad student here at Berkeley.
Great.
So I recently just discovered UX, and I realized I'm very passionate about this. And everything you just said is very inspiring to me. So I actually want to ask you if there are any resources you would recommend to people that are just starting UX.
Yeah, I would say some very, very free available resources. So the Stanford Design School has a lot of resources. IDEO, I'm going to mispronounce that, has some great ones. And then while I do have a lot of content on 2-hour design sprints, as I mentioned, a lot of the 2-hour design sprint concept was based off of design thinking, which is the Stanford and IDEO. And then also Jake Knapp and the team at Google's book on sprints. So those are kind of some of the free resources that I recommend. And then I also recommend part of the Master of Integrated Innovation program at Carnegie Mellon has a really large focus on UX, and they have a lot of free content there as well. So.
Sorry, can you say the last one again? The Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon University. It's the Master of Integrated Innovation for Products and Services, and that program is a really fantastic program. If anyone hasn't heard of it, but really the whole focus is on UX and design.
Okay. I have a little recommendation for you, actually. So
yeah.
I came across this video that's actually using exactly the sprint of. That is actually from IDEO. So they have like a 5 days deadline, and they're supposed to redesign this shopping cart. And that was like exactly what you're talking about. I thought it was a great example.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the 5 day is kind of where the basis of design sprints come from. I actually do a similar challenge. Like when I go to do a workshop, I'll take a website and as a group we'll redesign the whole website. It's really fun. So yeah, that's really fantastic. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Love this group. They are really pumped up with all the questions, diverse backgrounds. So really nice.
Yeah, so I've got, if anyone was interested in the on-demand training or the live workshop, I've got the same links I put in the chat room are here. And then just for this group alone, I mentioned I do have a website, but for this group offering the 50% discount code. And then the deck that'll be shared, I do have thank you. I do have a references guide. So when this goes out, you will have kind of some links to the references that I've talked about, including IDEO, Stanford, and the Sprint book are in there as well. So, and as always, I'm I'm from the Midwest, so I'm very personable. I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn and answer questions. Like I love this topic, and I love product management and UX and connecting. So just reach out with any questions, and I'm always happy to answer them. So
Yes.
I've got one more question.
Yes, just one more before we sign off for the session. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, yeah. My name is Yufi, and I'm a graduate student at University of Washington right now.
Great.
So, well, yeah, thank you for the time. I really enjoyed this session. And yeah, so basically this, from what I understand, like the 2-hour design sprint is focusing on like user experience, design thinking things.
Yep.
And like as a product manager, like we need to, leverage the business strategy and business model too. So how would you like leverage the user experience and also like business strategies into, the design sprint?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So I was kind of mentioning earlier that UX has kind of really become a really critical part of the role of a product manager. And so really, like, I think, but, not just a personal opinion, but also supported by like, I know we've got several people from different organizations here, but the user experience is what's going to sometimes make or break whether or not someone adopts your solution. And so, during the one-on-one sessions, we were talking a bit about, business to consumer versus B2B. And the user experience is so important as a product manager to be able to deliver the right features and make sure that you're solving the right problems. So the intent of the 2-hour design sprint is to make sure that you actually are focusing on those right problems. Sometimes we can get so lost with these longer 5-day design sprints that you have 100 problems and you're not really focusing on the right things. So if you're able to really condense the design sprint down, focus on the key problems, you as the product manager are taking the rails and running that design sprint, and you're also running the UX, partnering with your whole stakeholder group. So that's really kind of the key benefit is you now own the reins of UX in addition to your UX team, and you're more powerful in making sure you're delivering those experiences. So
yes, exactly. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So we have one final question from Tara, which is from the Figma site, how does one download the resources and templates?
Yeah, you actually just do a search. You do have to create an account in there, which Figma, FigJam, and Envision Freehand are both free up to 3 projects. Envision Freehand allows up to 100 collaborators, and Figma FigJam allows unlimited. So that's actually a big driver why I use Figma FigJam, because I run a lot of workshops throughout the year outside of the organization. So with that, you're able to go in there, create an account. It's free up to 3 projects. And then you just do a search on the left-hand side, and there's a lot of templates there. And then as mentioned, if you want, I've got templates as well that are specific to the 2-hour design sprints, but ultimately like you're able to trim it down if you find something on there you like as well. So yeah, great questions. Perfect. Thanks everyone for joining. This has been really inspiring, and I love hearing all the feedback today. So this is great.
Yes, thank you so much for all these patiently answering all our questions, all these power-packed insights, and especially the discount code. A lot of our enthusiastic participants have already signed up for it, so definitely looking forward to seeing most of these faces again.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect.
Thank you for your time, Teresa. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay connected. See everyone. Bye.
Bye.